Hi everyone, today let's talk about Meta earnings, then we'll get into the usual data and charts. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So Meta users missed and they warned of a jump in AI spending. Everyone is saying that you can't quite spend money fast enough on this AI build out, and the company is saying 3.29 billion active users, daily active users versus the 3.31 was the expectation. It still was up 5%, but lower than estimates, and you can see down about 2.5%, nothing crazy. Earnings per share, $6.03 versus $5.25. So their earnings is still very, very good. Revenue is still very good. Sales jumped 19%. So I'm not sure quite why there's so much focus on the daily active user count. It's still growing. The earnings are a massive beat, but markets are probably also being spooked by this capital expenditure between $38 and $40 billion, up from 37 to 40, and a potential acceleration on spending within the infrastructure for AI. Our AI investments continue to require serious infrastructure, they say here, which they continue to invest significantly, so says Mark Zuckerberg. So tons and tons of spending. This is what got Meta into hot water before and what pushed the stock down into the 150 to 200 range. I know it seems crazy now that Meta is up in the 500s, but it did used to be relatively cheap compared to where it is now. And you can see here Reality Labs, the metaverse portion of Meta, has lost $58 billion since 2020. So it isn't completely, so it's not nothing, but overall Meta is still a very valuable company. And they did beat very well. I do think that markets are underappreciating this significant beat. Moving over to Fear and Greed Index, down to 58 from a 60. This continues to trend lower, so definitely underneath the hood we're seeing some weakness, but momentum indicator still greed, strength continuing to be fear. Breadth getting into fear levels now, interesting. Markets really haven't gone with that too much. We've been talking about it on the breadth indicator, but for now it's been holding in there pretty well. Put call ratio flat in neutral. VIX spiking up a little bit here today, still in neutral. And then bonds really haven't moved. Junk bonds and safe haven demand still in extreme greed. Moving over to the earnings calendar, Microsoft beating on both, Meta beating on both, but forward guides not working out so well. Markets are down on that news. Eli Lilly, dumpster fire there as well. AbbVie beating on both, good for them. Starbucks missing on both, not great. Booking did very well, beat on both for them. Garmin beating on both, eBay beating on both, so there's definitely still some spenders out there. Even Kirby beating on both, interesting. And then tomorrow you got Apple, Amazon, MasterCard, Merck & Co., Comcast, Uber, Intel, always interesting, Monster Beverage, Vici Properties for you real estate folks. And then for the Friday, we get into all of those oil names, ExxonMobil, Simon Property, another real estate company, Chevron, Dominion Energy, Church & Dwight, another staple. So still lots of earnings left to go. Moving over to the economic calendar, barely anyone cares about this, it seems like, but GDP numbers came in a little bit weak. Core PCE prices at 2.2, which is still fine. A little bit higher than expectations, but still fine. ADP non-farms also doing quite well, 233, well above estimates. Previous number revised up a little bit. For tomorrow, we do have core and headline PCE index, initial jobless claims, as well as Fed balance sheet, Atlanta GDP, and then all of the unemployment data here for the Friday. Definitely going to be an interesting week with lots of earnings and still lots of data to go. Moving over to Max Payne, still 581, stock price just slightly below at 579.13. So now we have a little bit of green on the board. Remember, tomorrow is the interesting day with the 31st being down 1%. We'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. Understand it could give you a little bit of selling there, $6 lower from current price. Today held up okay, and then into the Friday it's supposed to be a little bit better, and then next week still fine. So tomorrow, interesting blip on the Max Payne. We'll see if that has any impact on price action tomorrow. Moving over to the charts, looking at the S&Ps, it was down 0.3 on the day. Momentum back to bearish, RSI breaking back down. So really no change to the thesis. Still looking at a breakdown, retest, breakdown. I thought we might get a little bit more push up to the trend here at 584.06. The high of day was 583.30, so did come up a little bit short there. Otherwise, still no change to the thesis. Support is the 21 EMA. 578.22 is the level, and we are basically there in the after hours action. We'll look at it on the hourly chart. If this breaks down, 55 EMA is your next level, down at 566.13 based on dynamic support. So at this point, I still think it's going to go. Really no change. I still think this is a rising wedge with the fake out, breakout, retest, breakdown. And then looking at the hourly chart, looks a lot more terrible here. You can see tried to rally up, could not get above the after hours price action from yesterday. Ended up selling mid-session, held the level on a closing basis, 579.78, but now you can see after hours falling about another 0.2. Momentum very bearish, breaking through that level. 574.71 is the next level. Seems like we're probably going to get there at least. Certainly possible you come up short a little bit in here. 21 EMA is in between here and there, but for now, that's your next level, especially if this continues to sell after hours and then pre-market tomorrow. Then looking at the 4-hour, you can see we fell just barely below that 89 EMA at 578.73. First ATR band also right there, 578.36. So holding in this zone here, still could not get above that first ATR band. We talked about it yesterday, and sure enough, that's where we are still holding as resistance. Still bearish conditions here on the 4-hour chart, and we are back into bearish conditions with that after hours falling action on the hourly. We were still bullish here through most of the session. After hours, we broke down. You can see that ATR trailing stop right now at 583 to the upside. Current price 578.92. Lowest ATR band holding as some support there, 578.36. So right in line with those same levels we talked about on the 4-hour chart. And then looking at the NASDAQ, down 0.76 on the day, 9 EMA holding as support at 494.87. That's pretty much where we are here after hours, 484.40. So just barely below it. You got some trend support in there, 484.96. We'll see if that continues to be relevant. Otherwise, your next support is all the way down at the 21 EMA, 491.70. Momentum stepping back to bearish, RSI back below the SMA. So we did get a slightly higher high, waiting to see if we get a slightly higher low. This previous wick low on the 23rd was pretty dramatic, so certainly could pull back into the 21, into the VWAP area. That would be 490.80. But for right now, just about $2 down after hours. And then looking at it here on the hourly chart, pretty much looks terrible all day. Did hold some support here briefly at my 498.44 level before breaking here on the 12 o'clock candle. Again, held the trend, broke down again after hours, just looks terrible. 492 is the level. Momentum bearish, RSI oversold already at a 30, just continues to fall after hours. But we'll take a look at Meta and Microsoft a little bit later. Then looking here at the Tasty charts here for the 4-hour, ATR trailing stop is at 493.43. So right there, just barely below price. 494.20 is where we're sitting. 494.17, somewhere in there. We're getting very close to bearish conditions. We'll see if we get the flip here soon. Momentum, not great. Volume, pretty decent, but not what you would want to see on a selling day. And then you can see it here on the hourly chart. Very oversold, well below that lowest ATR band, which is currently sitting at 495.21. Bearish conditions, obviously, flipping back into bearish conditions here on the hourly. So we'll see if that continues to be relevant and how much lower this can go in the after hours. Definitely concerning, but for now, definitely oversold. I would look for a slight bounce, but probably going to stay in bearish conditions. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. The Russell had a huge wick right to the trend line and then gave it all back to finish negative on the day. Not what you would want to see at all. 221.44 was the close. 221.49 is the level, so we closed below it. After hours getting a little bit of a pop, probably out of some earnings. Russell obviously not nearly as volatile relative to earnings, but a little bit of a rise there. I still want to see this hold this 21 EMA, which it did do, but that big wick concerning. I think we're going to get a little bit more on it. And then the Dow falling after hours like everything else. 418.38 is the next level. We're still looking for a test of that zone. Looks like a breakdown, retest, breakdown. Still looking for a little bit more bearishness. And then the 55 below that, 417.34. Momentum bearish, RSI still bearish. Moving over to the Mag 7, what a day here. It ended up getting to a new all-time high. The high of day was 293.75. Gave all of that back to finish just barely negative and below my level at 290.65. And now after hours, we're falling even more, about $5 here. So let's take a look at it. You can see it there on the 12-hour chart. Big down candle, nearly 2%. Momentum rolling to bearish right at this critical level, 283.46. Waiting to see if that can hold. If this breaks out, fails, and then starts to move lower, that's going to be very concerning. Still have some more earnings coming up. Obviously, we have Amazon and Apple still coming, but not a great omen, and I don't think Google can be the only one to perform well. Tesla did pretty well on their earnings. Google doing well, but so far we're seeing Meta and Microsoft not do as well as we head towards Amazon and Apple tomorrow. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft. Apple having a dumpster fire of a day, down 1.5%, continuing to break this level at 230.28, falling a little bit after hours. It's at 230.10. Your next support is the 55 EMA at 226.98. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. So at least a little bit more selling here, probably another 2% or so. See if that continues into this zone. Again, fake out, breakout, breakdown, retest, breakdown. Looks like we're going lower. And then you got a dumpster fire here with Microsoft as well. Jumping down to the 12-hour chart to see what that looks like, you can see the big down candle, 4% lower. The level is 413.36. We talked about that being important. That's the same low as here, so we're right back into this zone. That was the same zone we were watching before on this kind of consolidation up, hitting resistance here, waiting to see if this was going to break or not. So far it held up okay, and then we got the big breakout fake out here, and now we're back into the zone. If it sells off, I still think there is a potential for a bigger move down back into the 394, 388 area back down here. So something to consider, especially with the weak earnings. We've had a little bit of follow through on some earnings. AMD yesterday was pretty terrible, and that did continue lower today. And it seems like Microsoft pretty terrible here. Maybe we get some better forward guide, but right now, critical zone, testing some support, waiting to see if it breaks down. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA. Tesla did continue to fall here a little bit, 0.76, still holding the level at 255.44. We'll see if that level continues to hold. Right now it's doing okay. After hours, not so great. Momentum starting to fade here, might break down back into the 230, 240 area, somewhere in here. You got some trend support around 233. And then NVIDIA selling and then selling some more after hours, 1.36%, back below the 140 level. It held it yesterday, broke it here today, 21 EMA. At 135.22, momentum bearish, RSI bearish. So both of these look short-term bearish. Tesla looks a little bit better in my opinion, especially since they had their strong earnings already. Moving over to Meta and Google, we got Meta was down 0.25 on the day, but you can see after hours 572.95 is the current price. Volume huge. Momentum was swinging to bullish, but now it does not look so good. Similarly here to Microsoft, throwing a big wick to some support, waiting to see if this ends up holding up at all. Right now, we're still in the same consolidation. Wick to the top, could not break out. That was a new all-time high there briefly for Meta. And now you can see we're trying to find some support in here. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. And then Google had a strong day on earnings and then gave a lot of it back. It was all the way up in the 183, 184 area. And then we ended up falling back into the 175. So could just be a little bit of selling, a little bit of profit taking. I would expect this to find some support and then go higher from here eventually. But who knows where that's going to happen or when. This could potentially fall all the way back into the 171 area now that 179.42 level broke back to the downside. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, bit of an everything sell here today. Staples down 0.16, discretionaries 0.14. Momentum still bearish, broke the level, 79.90 is the next support, so looking for a touch there. And then discretionaries got back below the 253 cents level. Now we're looking for the 9, going to see if that holds or not at 190.02. Momentum bearish, RSI just barely bullish, just barely above the SMA, but we'll see how it plays. Right now, back into this consolidative range. Looks like a breakout, breakdown, which should be a little bit bearish. But of course, this is going to be driven by Amazon earnings tomorrow. Moving over to communications and transports. Communications gapped up, fell all the way back down to unchanged here in the after hours. Momentum still bullish, volume still good, hit overbought conditions. Still new all-time high for communications, but now it's falling back. We're going to see if that holds, just like we saw on Google. Now you have transports finding a little bit of strength. Interesting. After hours, not so great, down about 50 to 60 cents at 70.57 from 71.10. The level is 71.13. Could not get above it. Threw a big wick, closed below it. Momentum still looks okay. RSI still looks okay, just barely above the SMA, but with the after hours action, probably not so great. Moving over to RIOT and Marathon, these fell 3.5 and 3.5 just about on both. You can see broke back below the level, stopped me out of that position. If it gets back above it, maybe I'll get back in. I still like the structure here. The big consolidative base, just not doing it on my timetable. So see how it plays. Mara falling, not great. Similarly here on RIOT, gap up, gap down. That's what we were concerned about. So this might have a little bit more bearish action. It's already very extended, and you can see that it's back below the SMA on the RSI. So that's a little bit bearish as well. Might be time for a reasonable pullback. Then we'll see what happens. I would still expect a higher low based on this price action, but for now, I would be patient. Bullish structure, but short-term pullback. Moving over to 20 and 50-day breadth, you can see down 0.47. 50-day, however, up 1.11%. So this critical level, 52.81, seems to be holding right now. It's right at that trend. That's pretty much where it closed. Momentum stepping up slightly. My guess is that this is probably not going to hold up, especially with the after-hours selling that we're seeing here today. My guess is more things will go with that as we continue to see those two sell, but we'll see. Critical zone, it has bounced here before, just like we saw here. This is where we expect it to be. But if it breaks down from here, then you should be expecting somewhere between 40 and 43, which gives this a lot more downside. You can also see this kind of structure. It was rallying up, holding higher lows, and now you have a slightly lower low relative to this on a closing basis. So even if you started to see some rallies, this 50-day breadth might start to trend a little bit lower over the medium term. Similarly, here you have a lower low from this previous low. So this structure here looks a little bit more bearish as these continue to see weakness under the hood. Moving over to the dollar continues to fall a little bit here today, down 0.18, continues to find resistance at that critical level. Touched it once again. Immediately on the touch, sold off very aggressive. So 104.41, critical level, continues to sell from there, cannot get above these highs, and now we're starting to see a short-term bearish structure, momentum fading, RSI breaking down. The interesting thing is this should start to be a little bit of bullishness for equities. With the dollar being super aggressive here, equities were also super aggressive. Now the dollar is starting to show weakness, and equities are also starting to show weakness. So that's not usually what you like to see. It's not super common to see that, but that is what we're seeing right now, so just be aware of it. Moving over to bonds, J&K did hit that kind of consolidation of EMAs here and then reject from there, ended up down 0.2, back below the level 96.51. Not what we wanted to see. We wanted to see it retest, hold the level, and then bounce. It's not impossible. It's basically right on top of it, 96.50 after hours, so see how it plays. Right now, doesn't look super great. On the other side, though, we do have TLT, which I like much, much better here. This is definitely oversold now. You can see RSI, look at that. Got the higher low set up 3 in a row. We're back above the SMA. This is starting to trend higher. I think we're going to see a little bit of strength here in TLT. Did test the level, 92.82. Was positive on the day like we thought that it was going to be. This is critical now. This is consolidation. Wick low, bounced, consolidation. I think this is going to go here pretty soon. I'm probably going to be watching a position here. Let's go ahead and add an alert right at $93 flat. We did wick that level. Be watching that one here in tomorrow's session. Moving over to the VIX. The VIX was positive, 5% on the day. We said it could hold this higher low. It ended up doing it, and now we got to push back above the 20 level. Closed right on the high with the selling after hours. I would guess this is going to go higher. 22.50 was the target if it got above 20. So see if we get there. We'll see if we get into it tomorrow. Above that, you have some trend resistance around 23.25, somewhere in there. At this point, just continues to trend higher. Equities really have not gone too much lower with the VIX trending higher, but eventually I do think that they will turn lower once we start to see that structure break down. And you can also see here on the RSI, we're above the SMA, starting to trend up a little bit there as well. So see how it plays out. Right now, the VIX looks a little bit bullish. Moving over to my accounts, I was basically flat on the day, but this is probably not going to hold up in tomorrow's session. You can see open profit on this position was already $200, have another $1.69 per option, not a ton of protection. I had an inkling to take this off into the end of the session, and it turns out that that was the right move, and I just did not do it. So sometimes you struggle to pull the trigger, and today was that day for me, which is super unfortunate. I will have some protection. We'll see if it continues to crater into the pre-market tomorrow. Maybe I'll have to put on some futures for a little bit of protection to the downside. But for now, holding this position, IWM 222 for the Friday session, $2.50 credit, a little bit of profit there. Want to see this hold up after hours. It's actually up a little bit into the 222 area. So up about 50 cents after hours puts me in good position to make some money here into the end of the week. And then Google still holding this one, waiting to see how that ends up playing out. The shares are still in plenty of profit. The covered call is basically flat, and you can see we're basically at my max profit. 176.14, 176.08 would be my max profit, so there's about $50 left. If this continues to crater tomorrow, I'll probably take it off, but for right now, sitting on it into the Friday session. Overall, I was neutral, but with that after hours price action, probably going to see a little bit more bearishness into the pre-market. The earnings were not terrible, but the forward guide seems to be spooking markets, which is not great when you still have Apple, Apple, probably not going to do super hot. And then Amazon tomorrow. Amazon could do better. Maybe that holds up markets a little bit, especially with the Google results, but I'm not super excited about Apple. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of the earnings today. What do you think about the upcoming earnings? Don't forget about the economic data. We still could see some volatility into the Friday, and then Max Payne for Thursday, a little bit spooky as well. So tons of stuff out there. Put it down in the comments. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of today's video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.